and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. As usual, I'm joined by my own personal on-call superhero, James Anir. How are you, my good friend?
I am fantastic, Sam. It's really good to
Awesome.
see you.
Well, as you said off camera, I am out of state today with grandma's curtains behind me. I'm not at grandma's house, but the owner of the house that I'm at is probably going to love the fact that you called their curtains grandma curtains. So I'm going to say it on the podcast for everybody to hear and everybody to see.
I
Today
also
we're at
said I also said that I dig them. So
okay, that's fair. So today we're talking about a question that reverberates in both the unfaithful as well as the betrayed. I think any betrayed I've ever worked with has at some level always brought up this question. And I know many unfaithful struggle with this. Like how can I do this? The question is, how does the unfaithful, or even how does the betrayed, measure progress in the life of the unfaithful? Asked another way, what can a betrayed look for in the life of an unfaithful that illustrates safety, illustrates a passion, a commitment? What should the unfaithful look for in their own life to know if they are really doing, as we say in this industry, the heavy lifting? So, with that, take it away, James.
well, I think there's all kinds of emphasis on red flags out there. So I just want to say that this one's going to be, you could easily flip it around into red flag stuff, but I think it's really appreciated when people go in a positive direction, and so these are going to be kind of green flags, right? So these are the things that, hey, if this is happening, this is going well.
That's exactly right. Practical is always great to start with because I think, man, so many people overcomplicate the hell out of it. And when you're all over TikTok and you're all over Instagram and you're just desperate for insight and you can make it practical, but then take it down to the granular. I think that's what helps people walk away going, okay, I feel better. I feel equipped, you know?
Right. So I think there's two areas in recovery, and behavioral, right? So we could loosely call that sobriety, right? And then relational, which is really how are you relating to your significant other, to your partner? How are you relating to others in your life? And how are you, very importantly, how are you relating to yourself?
Right.
Are you shaming yourself, or are you supporting yourself and changing your thinking and working positively towards goals and mutual goals? So the within those two, within each of them, you have quantitative and qualitative measures, right? So the quantitative do not necessarily guarantee the qualitative,
And
right?
there's no guarantee you can do all of this stuff, and there's no guarantee at all. And let the unfaithful and the betrayed hear, we're never going to be throwing out guarantees, but these are some metrics that you can use to either say, hey, I'm not seeing these things, I'm really feeling unsafe, or hey, he or she isn't perfect, but they're sure checking some pretty substantial boxes that are making me feel safe
Right.
and that I want to keep going in this relationship, right?
Yeah, and there's you raise a really important point, because the checkboxing, it cannot just be checkboxing for the sake of checkboxing, right? Well, I'm
Right.
going to my meetings, or I'm going to my therapy, and it has to be something that the partner feels safer, that the unfaithful is doing that, right? So the betrayed feels safer that the unfaithful is doing it. That also can take us into a difficult area of where a betrayed might want to check on every single thing they're doing. And there
Right.
has to develop sort of a trust in a program there. And that can take some time to develop that trust. But you want to be cautious about, okay, you've got to check in on every single thing that you're doing here. So the the quantitative stuff, really has to be a self-checking thing, right? So I love that you brought up checking the boxes, because some people do that in a very perfunctory way, in a way that's not meaningful, and it does have to be meaningful.
So it's interesting you say quantitative is really self-driven. So what are some examples of the quantitative work that they can be kind of babysitting and checking on themselves? Because that implies, so we're gonna imply today
Mhm.
that every unfaithful listening or watching is all in, authentic, and serious. So with that, what are some examples?
So the first thing that really, so some of these really rely on a definition of um, having the unfaithful having sort of outlined with help what their bottom lines are. So bottom lines are just basically really concrete things that I will never do. I will never do these things, right? And then accessory behaviors, or what are otherwise known as boundary behaviors. These are the things that are dangerous, right? We call it the no zone, the danger zone. And then we have the top lines, which are the things that are going to keep you healthy and that you should engage with. And those we call at core anyway, that we call the go zone. So we like the zones, right? But it's not a new concept. These are the three circles that are used a lot throughout this. So in that, look at, when people are starting out, they're going to look at things like percentage of time off of bottom lines, percentage of, percent versus percentage of time acting out or wanting to, right? Percentage of time off their accessory behaviors or out of the danger zone, right? And then I think most importantly, because, well, not most importantly, they're all equally important, and that gets forgotten. But if you're not engaging in your top lines or your go zone, that's going to undermine everything. You'll be white knuckling. So
So what's
you're
an
looking at
example of
percentage.
go zone stuff?
So go zone stuff would be, therapy, group therapy, 12 step if you're doing that, and I highly recommend that. Unfortunately, people go, "What? I'm not an addict. I'm a compulsive." Okay, it can still benefit you. Um,
Sure.
but so we'll say meetings, which can be 12-step meetings. They can be support groups, right, which are not necessarily therapist led, right?
Right.
So engaging in those, engaging in journaling. Now, when you say that, guys anyway typically will go, "Ew, I don't like journaling." Well, we have at core at hopeforus.com, we have a journaling format that's really, really concrete and really quick. And it really helps to be able to just be that quick and concrete, because then you're not having to go, "Oh my God, I've got to write 3 pages of what my feelings and thoughts are." No, it doesn't have to be that, but it's engaging in these things. Telephone calls with supports, meetings with your sponsor or mentor, depending on what you're doing. But these
Yeah.
things
It
they come into dailies and weeklies, right? Like
well,
daily
and I think
is important.
if you're not seeing somebody like a therapist or a highly qualified coach every week, it's just incredibly challenging to gain ground. There's only so much you're going to get from a book. There's only so much that you're going to get from watching videos. No disrespect to YouTubers or podcasters, but you have to be actively involved with someone on a weekly level, challenging yourself, nurturing yourself, confronting yourself, caring for yourself. And the goal is progress, not perfection. None of these things are things that we can all do perfectly, but at least there's authentic effort, right?
Right. So, that brings up a thought about progress versus perfection. Almost all people who are at minimum a compulsive level, if not addictive, are also perfectionists. You'll find that a
Mm.
lot. Now, that doesn't mean they're perfect at everything. They just, because guess what? Perfection is a formula for failure, and failure leads to acting out because it feels like shame, right? So, here's the thing though, perfection is really it's kind of like trying to be godlike, right? Or trying to be a god. And what that means is that when we're trying to do that, we're also setting aside our humility.
Mm.
And that becomes a real problem because then we end up doing what we've always done, which is holding on to our will, you know, believing we can manage it, we can handle it all, and without some sort of surrender to a process, you know, we're gonna fail. And that's gonna trigger us into more acting out. So perfection is our enemy here. And so it sounds so cliche, progress, not perfection. But if you really break it down and think about what it means, it's really important.
I think some betrayeds might hear that and go, So to
Yeah,
those of you that who are betrayeds, we do think it is totally acceptable for you, the betrayed, to expect a perfect effort. Now, they're not going to be perfect, but you sure want to see that they're working their butts off. Because if they're not working their butts off, any betrayed, male or female, would say, why am I working my butt off to overcome all the pain and the hurt and the devastation I'm feeling when Knucklehead here or Knucklehead Ed refuses to go to therapy, refuses to do any work? But you're never going to be perfect, but it's really about effort. It's about
yeah,
authentic desire to heal and repair. Would that
yeah.
be a fair
So
assessment of
I think
your?
that's really fair, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because definitely that needed to be brought into this because it really otherwise it just becomes, oh well, I can't be perfect, so that's permissive. That is not what we're advocating at all. There has to be um, some level of uh, understanding that within ourselves that we're going to struggle, right? But we don't have to act out on that struggle because we're going to build things like the support system. We're going to have accountability partners. We're going to have sponsors or mentors. We're going to have coaches and therapists. And that's absolutely necessary because guess what? Doing it on our own, and all of us have tried to stop
Yeah.
on our own. And generally speaking, if you're watching this, you probably didn't succeed at that, right?
Or you just thought that you knew what your partner needed and weren't probably able to give it, or your efforts probably got lost. And
Yeah,
so one of the best things that you could do is humble yourself and say, I need some outside help here because these people probably know more than I do. And maybe I don't know what is best. Maybe I can learn a little bit here. Not that you and I are perfect, but we've been through some massive failures, and we could both tell you neither of us is perfect, but we've sure learned a thing or two by experience as well as reading, learning, certifications, you name it. So as we talk more about the go zones, some metrics, what are more go zones for the unfaithful to check themselves and for the betrayed to go, okay, I'm not seeing that, I'm not seeing that, or I am seeing that. That gives me some hope.
okay. So these are not all behavioral and relational, or relational. They're both, right? So practicing self-care. So that's sort of the what does that mean? Oh, take a nice hot bath with a candle and okay, yeah. And self-care is when, okay, I'm feeling really off right now. Well, that's a danger zone, right? So what's my top line response to that danger zone is to make a phone call, is to meditate, is to use somatic interventions that somebody who's helping you will teach you, right? And uh, so calling, texting, meeting, um, writing down what you're feeling, sharing that, being vulnerable, bearing in mind though that your partner is not your therapist. It cannot be, it's not fair,
Or
right?
your accountability partner,
Nope. No.
or or who you share everything with. That needs to be a coach, a mentor, a therapist, even a close friend now, a safe close friend that isn't going to say, "Are you sure you want to save this marriage?"
Right.
Or, "Ah, she sounds like she's off her rocker." No, no, no. That's not safe. Safe is someone that goes, "Man, I get it. I'm sorry. Are you using your tools that your therapist or coach has taught you? Where are you doing anything stupid? What are you thinking about? How are you feeling? What can I do? How do I support you? Do you want to meet? Do you want to go get a meal? Do you want to talk? Do you want to get a cup of coffee? Like, how do I help you?" That's a safe person, right?
Yeah, somebody who is going to gently and heartfully challenge you, right? I'm not big into the what's the matter with you? You got to do that. That whole sort of
Yeah,
militaristic side of things.
sure.
But I am into what you just described. Somebody who's gentle, who gets you, who gets that you're in pain and is willing to challenge you and help you with that challenge. So practicing self-care is all of that. You know, um, Having active connections with people of integrity, and that includes people who are practicing their sobriety. You know, Honoring your own and your partner's boundaries, huge. You're not just trying to get your own sobriety and recovery here, you're trying to get relational recovery as well. And that takes a lot of work to try to reestablish trust and to help your
Yeah.
partner feel safe, right? So
Now,
honoring their boundaries is really important.
you said something earlier too in some of the notes that you shared with me, asking the unfaithful, asking themselves some hard questions like, have I felt or experienced or held on to any resentment today?
Yeah,
Have I felt alone or abandoned today? Have I felt rejected? Did I struggle with shame today? Right? Those are really introspective questions. But why
yes,
are they important? Because you can be driving and say, "Oh, I felt this today." But why is it important for the unfaithful? And I know the answer, but why is it important for the unfaithful to look inward and ask themselves these hard questions today?
because those things are in your danger zone. So
That
that's
might be why they got in this position in the first place, right? Not asking themselves those questions.
So if you have a resentment, it's one of the biggest reasons why people act out. They have resentment, or they feel shame, which is probably the number one reason, right? Did I, and a couple of other questions really positive. Did I feel accepted today? Did I feel connected? Did I share my feelings? So that sharing your feelings can be with that same person we talked about, friend, therapist, coach, sponsor, accountability partners, and so on. Um, And then there are a set of feelings that you need to be able to share with your partner because that's a big one, that vulnerability piece.
I think it's fantastic that you said that. I think it would be fantastic to say, have I opened up and shared my feelings with my partner today within reason? Like, if your spouse or partner says, "So, how was work? How did you feel? How are you feeling today?" So many unfaithfuls clam up and shut down, and the betrays are sitting here going, they never talk, they never emote. I don't know what's going on. And they're just afraid of making a mistake, or they're so full of shame that they don't feel like they can. But isn't it powerful when the unfaithful says, "Yeah, today I kind of struggled with feeling like a failure. I struggled with feeling kind of like an idiot, but I didn't stay there. I felt like it." I mean, to me, I find that to be very powerful that the unfaithful brings the betrayed into their world a little bit, not to feel sorry for them,
Right.
not for pity, but for just connection, right?
Exactly. Now, there are going to be times when a partner's not ready to hear that, right?
Right.
And because the partner might have some trouble discerning between what is victimy and the pity party, right?
Sure.
Versus what is honest, genuine, authentic sharing. And I think that, authenticity is part of what we call PACE, which is presence, authenticity, collaboration, and empathy. Not collaboration, we used to just call it communication, but communication is a part of collaboration. So we can think of this as being authentic with our feelings, so present to our feelings, authentic with them, collaboratively sharing them, not asking for a solution, but basically you're communicating what you're feeling without expectation that partner's going to resolve those, right?
Yeah.
And then empathy, when you're sharing your feelings, you're working on empathy for yourself and in a healthy way, right? Not the I'm a victim type of, that's not real self-empathy, right?
No,
When you do that, it opens up your ability to do that for your partner too, to
because
hear.
you're exactly right. Because one of the questions that you put in the notes is, have we asked how our partner is feeling today without trying to fix it? Because we'll take a break and say, listen, as unfaithful, sometimes we ask our partner how they're doing, and then they tell us and we want to fix it. And that's the last thing that the betrayed wants. The
Right,
betrayed is like, oh gosh, please. So we can ask our partner how they're feeling because we want to be empathetic, because we want to be compassionate, because we genuinely care about them. If the betrayed never hears the unfaithful say, well, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Did you have any reminders or triggers today? The betrayed comes away going, do you even have a clue what it's like to be over here, right?
right. There's a vital piece to that. When you ask, you must listen.
Oh,
And one of the ways you can guarantee yourself that you're listening, because I can tell you, I struggled with presence. Like, I mean, seriously, being present for 20 seconds was really hard for me. Right. So I had
mm,
to like imagine this hot air balloon floating away and it was tethered and I had to pull it back. Literally, I was imagining that in my head. Nope, stay here, stay here, stay here. It was
mm.
so difficult. It was amazing how difficult. You would think it'd be simple. Well, it is simple. It's just not easy, right? So, okay. So, one of the ways that you can keep yourself present is to ask questions, right? This is simple, basic, active listening. And I would dare say 90% of the people in the world don't do it very well, right?
Right.
That's not just people in betrayal, right? Or who have betrayed the unfaithful, right? So, this is absolutely key. How are you feeling? Okay, and then I'm going to listen and I'm going to go, okay, in some form or another, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah.
That must have been really scary, or that must be really painful, right?
And have it be authentic and not, well, I wish you'd stop thinking about that. I wish you'd stop fixating on that.
I'm
I
sorry you
wish
feel
you'd,
that way.
that kind of sucks, but I wish you'd, maybe you just need to control your thoughts better.
Yeah,
Maybe you just need to get out more.
yeah.
Oh gosh, we could do that for an hour. So you said something, I loved the acronym, the PACE. I wrote it down. Presence, authenticity, collaboration, and empathy. So how does that, we don't have all the time in the world, but very quickly, how does that play out for an unfaithful, also for a betrayed that's looking for some kind of a tool to go, hey, this would help us. Let's do this. What does that look like?
Okay, so um, individually, it looks like just checking that. Was I present? How often in that conversation did I drift off? You're going to get a real feel for. And then if you're on the other side of it, how much did it feel like that person was present? You know, and to practice it as a couple, then you talk about, okay, let's talk about XYZ right now. Now, that doesn't even have to be about the relationship. That can be about, hey, this was really, I heard this today, it was really interesting. And then having a conversation about that and practicing being present for that conversation. Now, early on, it's probably going to be more relationship oriented, right? What I'm trying to introduce there is, hey, you can interact without it having to be about the relationship. And when you're a little more comfortable with each other, perhaps, right?
Yeah,
When some trust has been built. Authenticity means that there's no image management, right? Which is a image management. It can be a whole podcast for us, and I think it should be.
absolutely.
Um, but there's no managing of what you look like, how trying to manage how the other person perceives you. It is just plain you, right? And then collaboration. So you're doing it in terms of you've agreed to talk about a topic, talk about this thing, right? So you're communicating, which is a big part of the collaboration. If there is a solution to be had, then you're working on it together, right? So that you're taking into account the other person's feelings and what they need, right? So this is also that goes back to hey, how can a partner know? Wow, okay, he's really taking my feelings into account, or she's really taking my feelings into account, um, in this situation, and I can feel that. Uh,
Right.
Empathy really is when you're talking about something to really try to get how that other person feels. Look, we can't put ourselves inside the other person's body and in their heart and feel everything, but we can relate it to our own experience. And we don't have to do that out loud, because that could make it all about me. But we
Right.
can jump into that feeling and go, oh, that's the best. That might be the best we can do to be connected to that feeling. And it might be, oh man, I remember when that was so much fun. And I'm
Yeah.
so happy for you that that happened today, that you felt like, you, whatever it is, that success or whatever. So I think it's very useful that way. It's, it makes things a little more concrete, right?
I
Um,
think, and I think whenever you as a couple, whether you're watching or whether you are listening, I know in my recovery, there were so many times where I felt like I was just wandering through the woods without any kind of organization and clarity. And would you agree that at some level you can write pace down and ask yourself every day, have I been present with
yeah,
my kids, my spouse or partner, myself?
yeah,
Have I been authentic today? Have I collaborated with my partner? And if I haven't, maybe there's still time in the day to go to my partner and go, hey, uh, we've been somewhat disconnected today or this last week. And empathy, being able to show empathy. Now, there's not the letter I in here, but would you agree that at some level this pace really requires initiation with or intentionality within the mind,
absolutely. I
right?
think it, yeah, I don't know that it has to be in that, but you could say I pace. Sure. I like that. Maybe I'll change it. I'll talk to Sharon.
I
We'll
think it
change
has
it.
to, because wouldn't you agree? I just I spend a lot of time telling unfaithfuls, male and female, if there's no initiative, why should they even trust you? Why should they even feel like you're serious?
So
Is
yeah, I think you're right here. It's incumbent on the unfaithful to initiate that. I think you'll find, generally speaking, partners have tried to initiate things many, many, many times over the years.
sure.
So that shows quite clearly the all-inness, the
Yes.
motivation, that initiating that piece, because otherwise, what else can it, it can feel like, oh, I'm going to ask again for this.
Oh,
Oh, and I'm going to get
absolutely.
this reaction potentially, or a resentment or whatever. And so really, if the unfaithful is the one who initiates, that is going to send a very clear message that this matters. And of course,
And
it has to matter.
well, and that the betrayed matters, and that their betrayed's feeling matters,
Mhm.
and that they are not just off in their own world. I mean, for almost 2 decades, I think one of the biggest frustrations or complaints that betrayeds will raise is, you know what, Sam? If I don't do it, it doesn't get done. If I don't book the therapy appointments, if I don't book our group therapy, if I don't buy the books, if I don't bring it out, if I don't schedule it, it doesn't get done. If you're an unfaithful, it just because you show initiative doesn't mean everything's okay, or that the betrayed will even do half the stuff that you might be suggesting because they haven't warmed up to it yet. Maybe they're still feeling pain and hurt and rage. Maybe they're not ready. But I can tell you, and certainly I want your thoughts on this, James, if there's no initiative, if there's no initiation by the unfaithful, it sends a very clear message, whether it's true or not. It sure sends a message to the betrayed that I don't think they want this, right?
Yeah. So has to be proactive, period. You have to take the action. It's just like, okay, uh, I went to SLAA meetings, right? Would I ask Sharon to go to those for me? Well, no.
Right.
and it wouldn't be effective, right? And what would be the point? I had to initiate that. I had to be proactive about it. So, you can go through all this tracking that we talked about. So I'm reading it here, percentage of off of bottom lines, amount of time spent in top lines. Did you attend a meeting or support group? Journaling, number of telephone or text, you can, amount of time in recovery reading done today. That's a big one. Amount of time doing recovery exercises. Service to others today, big
Yeah,
one. Um,
sure.
Therapy, group therapy, recovery groups, that could be weekly, checking in with yourself on how long you've stayed off your bottom lines, number of sober days or months or years, amount of time feeling at peace versus feeling obsessive or in isolation, not solitude. Solitude is growth. Isolation is
Right.
when you're on yourself and alone with your negative, with your revolving circular thoughts. How long did I spend ruminating? Speaking of circular thoughts, or holding on to things that stress me today? Did I feel resentment today? Did I feel shame today? Did I feel accepted by others? Did I disconnect? Those are all things that you can ask yourself, very solidly. Those are yes or no answers. Those are numeric answers. But if if you don't do them, what's the point in having the list? And I think you simplified it by saying, can we just do that with pace? I pace.
Yeah. I think you said this. I've been waiting the whole podcast to say this. It's it's my Ace of Spades that I'm just going to pull out.
Okay.
I've heard you say it. I've heard another expert clinician that many of the audience may or may not know, Amanda Esproni, has said this. I never said it until I heard you guys say it because it just wasn't a thought. And if you're an unfaithful, I don't want this to shame you. I don't want this to make you feel shame. I want this to be a moment that makes you go, okay, Sam, that's a great point. It's a bit irrefutable. I'm going to accept that as truth. If we spent as much time working on our marriage or our relationship post affair, post disclosure, as we did active in our affair or in our addiction, it's a pretty good metric because we spent hours. We had so much urgency in our affair or with our affair partners or in our addiction. And we can't spend 30 minutes to read a book. We can't have a conversation with our partner for 20 minutes. We can't go sit in through an hour therapy session, or we can't do an intensive, but we spent hours upon hours texting, hours upon hours, all the different things. And I don't want to trigger the betrayed, but we were in an affair for months, weeks, years,
Mhm.
and we can't do some little things. That's not a shaming statement. It's a perspective statement to say, when you really think about this, it's a pretty easy comparison. Where does your relationship stand? Well, Sam, my partner, they don't want to do this work yet. Okay, you can still do your work. You can still spend time on your own, working on yourself, reading, doing therapy, watching podcasts, right? Am I wrong or am I pretty spot on? I know the answer, but I feel like I need to ask you, James, so that I stay humble in front of everybody.
Yes, you're spot on. So, you know, you can think of it as we're all living in Missouri, the show me state, right?
Yep, good one.
Show me, right?
Good
Show
one.
yourself that you mean business,
Good one.
because your inner self is what will throw you off track. Your inner, whether it's an addict or compulsive or whatever it is, that's the one that will throw you off track. So show that inner part of yourself, your inner parts, right? If we go
Yeah.
with IFS or inner child work, got to show that this, I'm serious about this. This is what I want. Okay,
Yes.
if you have to sort of go back and take an inventory, how many hours a day did I spend watching porn? How many hours a day did I spend thinking about this or escaping into fantasy or whatever it is? Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, that was like 5. That was like 8. Okay. Was that happening when I was at the kids' baseball game? Or was that happening when we were out to dinner? All kinds of things. So, all right, yes, it adds up to a lot. And, if honestly, it's when we minimize it and go, and you know why we do it? You know why we minimize and go, I only, well, that's a lot of time for me to spend reading, or an hour in a meeting, or, man, therapy for an hour a week intensive, or, whatever, right? What is it that's the difference? One, when we're acting out, we're escaping, which
Yeah.
at the time makes us feel good. Believe me, after we're done escaping, we're now in
Oh
shame.
yeah.
We don't
Absolutely.
feel good. And when we think about healing and the work that has to go into that and the unknown, right? We talked about this in a previous podcast, that unknown. Do I exist right now? Right?
Yeah.
Um, that's so scary. So we resist it. And I'm going to just give you an easy key here. If you're resisting something, go towards it. It's
Mm,
incumbent on you to go towards it hard, because
yeah.
if you continue to resist it, it will persist and it'll
Yeah.
get worse. So that's just one of those keys. If I'm resisting, I got to go towards that, whatever
It's
that
great.
thing is.
It's great. I
That's
think
how I
today's
run my
been,
life. Right?
man, amen, brother. I mean, listen, I think this has been a very um telling discussion. I love the fact my controlling brain says I want to just put together a spreadsheet, but unfortunately, the the deceiver in me would say, "Oh, just check a box." Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the fact that we've had such a discussion that throws out so many different metrics that you can grab and that you can look for as an unfaithful or as a betrayed. And I guess a good litmus test is as we say goodbye today, if you're an unfaithful and you're angry about this, if you're like these guys, I would challenge you to go, well, why is that? What have we tapped into today? What is it that you might be projecting or transferring onto us when this is how we live now? I'm not an addict, but I have a way of living that keeps me safe, that keeps me healthy, that keeps me away from my shadow side. And then I talk about my shadow side with people like you and other therapists that I trust that are in my safe care team. So, for those of you that are watching, if James or I can help, you can always reach out to us. You can email us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. Hit the like button. We'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. There'll be so much more information that we continue to share with you. James, I've said so much. Why don't you say goodbye to everybody today? Leave them with a little nugget based upon what we've talked about today.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for listening and engaging in this. It's really such an important topic. I mean, this stuff is why I am where I am today. And
Right.
and I do identify as an addict. And even if you don't identify as an addict, all of this works no matter who you are or
Right.
what your experience is with this. So I think the one of the nuggets I think is going to be, you talked about the shadow side. There's a reason why you talk about it with people, because the shadow side of us is just what's unknown. It's what's unconscious, right? It's not to be feared. What it is to be embraced, because if we don't talk about it, if we don't explore it, we can't integrate it. And if we can't integrate it or don't integrate it, it's going to keep causing us trouble,
Yes.
right? So if I can say anything, this journey is, and even with these very solid, concrete check-ins, it's about embracing the part of us that we don't know. And
Yeah.
that is what it takes to live a fully realized life, to become fully you. Otherwise, we're subject to all of those drives, all of those things that have pulled us into behaviors that are outside of our integrity, outside of who we really are. And that
Absolutely.
is not okay to continue in that. It's not fair to yourself, certainly, and certainly not fair to your partner. So please engage in it.
Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.